We got a lot of stuff happening in Star Citizen out of nowhere while I was gone. Just kind of, this is what CIG does. So let's dive right into it. The big piece of news. This is our big topic. Alpha 3.21 is in PTU. And they're going to go into a little bit of detail here. This is actually Benoit Bourgeoisie, I think is how you say his name. He's going to go into a little bit of detail here to talk about why 3.21 is coming out. Hello, everyone. He actually says hi, everyone, but I'm giving him both a different accent and slightly different words. Star Citizen Alpha 3.21 has just been released to the PTU. The primary reason for the nomenclature change from 3.20.1 to 3.21 is to signify Star Citizen approaching the next major milestone in its online networking technology. So straight away, the cat's out of the beanie baby. I'm just going to try and mess up all of the sayings today, okay? So don't jump the fence. The cat's out of the pot here. The patch itself is just a renamed version of what we were already expecting. So not a huge deal, but let's keep listening, see what else there is. Most of you have already watched, probably watched somebody go over this before. So you're just like watching me go through it, I guess, which is still fun. During the 3.21 patch update, we will introduce a new testing channel aimed at graduating new underlying technology. This new channel allows the dev teams to get players on a version of the game that matches the current live release in both content and features, but that introduces large tech changes that must be validated, graduated, and ultimately mission proven before making their way to a live release. This is going to... I should probably update the title and thumbnail of this video, but I put out a video earlier today that goes over how these updates are applied. Many of you may have heard 3.20 was a different code base. That was kind of a common thing that was being said. And essentially what that meant was that CIG had not diverted their development away from what was going on with 3.18. So they released 3.18 and then 3.19 was stacked on top of 3.18. They used the same kind of code. They just added more stuff in. That's why that's usually something that they can do if there's no major changes to the back end or the game itself. 3.20 was the first new code base after 3.18. That's why 3.20 does feel a little better, allowed them to get rid of some of the bigger bugs like invisible players and stuff. Now what he's saying here is that instead of doing a 3.20.1, which for all intents and purposes, wait, no, that's another saying. For all intents and PowerPoints, the 3.20.1 would be just like 3.19 to 3.20 what 3.18 was. You get what I mean? 3.19 was essentially 3.18.1. So instead of doing a 3.20.1 on the same code as 3.20, he's saying, okay, we are preparing for the next major addition to codebase. So we're updating with a new code base using 3.21. That's essentially the whole point of this update. And now he'll go on to say why they have to get a new code base. So the first project to enter this new technology preview channel is the replication layer, something we've heard about quite a bit, which is a core networking part of the server meshing infrastructure. In this update, the game's networking replication and state are separated from the game's server into its own service. This is really the main idea behind server meshing. Server meshing was all about separating out the server itself from the simulation that's running. And someday I'm going to get a proper understanding of this. I generally, what I'm saying now comes from the people building server meshing, but not necessarily with their understanding. So I'm not going to dive into that super far. But the idea is to get a separation between the data and the simulation so that they can both run independently and won't interrupt each other if there's like a server crash or something happens on the back end. This is super crucial for us to be able to play the game without crashing, for 30Ks to be gone, for the game to be able to handle a larger load and run correctly. It's just like an overall big deal. So replication layer is kind of like that next step, that prerequisite to get server meshing working. where were we? Game clients are connected to this new service, and the game server itself becomes a client with authority on the replication layer. With the replication moving off the game servers, the team is hoping to begin testing server recovery without disconnecting game clients from the universe state on a given game shard. That's the idea. So you're not necessarily gonna feel those crashes once this crash recovery is actually working. This isn't to say it's going to be working in 3.21. In short, this is the next step towards testing components of server meshing after deploying persistent entity streaming earlier this year. For the time being, the game server will only be managing the Stanton system, so you won't notice much of a change in your experience. However, this is a critically important step as we progress towards Alpha 4.0 and beyond. We'll share more information about Alpha 3.21 in our upcoming roadmap update next week, and you can look ahead to CitizenCon for more information about the preview channel and how it will play a vital role in further bringing our shared universes to life. As to say, of course, at CitizenCon, we will indeed be talking about server meshing. I don't think anybody should expect less. The funny thing about this, though, is what was said there at the end, that we're going to hear more at the roadmap roundup. I understand why the game's in 3.21 PTU. I get that. It's just funny that it is in PTU and people are playing it and we can't even see it on the roadmap yet. Just caps off an annoying period of low information. There's a couple of things here that are interesting to consider. Let's see. So this is following the persistent entity streaming drop that we had earlier. The first order of business, now this is the beginning of this year. This is before we got PES in game, but they thought PES was coming pretty soon. First order of business is to continue to stabilize Alpha 3.18 so we can release to the live servers in January. That obviously didn't happen. They were set back a couple of months. Once the team is back from their well-earned holiday break, then we will continue to harden PES, improving aspects and adding some additional quality of life features, including the ability to choose which PES shard you would like to join. We still can't do this. So this hardening process didn't happen, and it's possible that it might be coming with the replication layer in 3.21. This might be something that we hear about on Wednesday, but we don't really know yet. The current game server or PES shard matchmaking tries to match you to the latest PES shard you were in when you log back in or recover from a crash, but if that shard is full, it places you in a different one. Now, we've all had that happen before as well. In the short term, before server meshing makes this not so necessary, we also want to give players the choice to wait in a queue for their preferred shard if it is full. Again, this is something that we don't have yet. This is this is still to come, and I think this was all dependent on the timeline going well. This is one of those situations where I don't think they misled with this messaging, but I think things are changing so quickly that it's hard to stick to this. I think that this is the plan if things went as they wanted them to, but PES just straight broke. And I think they had to compact this over the last 6 months, and instead of releasing any patches that allowed this stuff to happen, kind of group all this sort of functionality in with whatever next patch they need to do to get to server meshing, because they have fallen behind, and I think they're feeling the heat on a monthly basis at this point. So that next step, the one we've been talking about, is that it will be the next step will be to separate the replication layer, the in-memory cache that remembers all dynamic object states, from the game server and separate it from the game server and have scalable replication layer workers that communicate the state changes between the various game client servers and the replication layer. So that is what they're talking about now with 3.21. That's separation of the replication layer. It's very important because for server meshing, as universe state needs to be fully decoupled from server state, that is again that separation of the simulation from the data we talked about, it will also make Star Citizen much more crash resilient on the client side, as a server crash will no longer take down the replication layer as well, meaning that clients can stay connected while a new server takes over where the last one left off. It will also have the added benefit of having the view every client has of the universe around it be a little more fluid with less lag, as the client's update and refresh of object state will no longer be tied to the tick rate of the game's server. I hate the sentences in these letters. They're so confusing. This means players will see state changes from other remote clients and game servers as they happen at the states the various clients and servers push them. I have one more verification of this system. The messaging has been consistent on this. Let's go all the way back to CitizenCon 2020, I want to say. 2021. So about 2 years back, they were talking about this same thing. This is 2 years ago now. Same sort of messaging, I'm pretty sure. Let's have a listen in.
Okay, let's go back to Paul to learn about some of the benefits of the server meshing architecture.
Yeah, the first benefit is obviously the advantage that we don't have this issue of synchronization between different server nodes. Each server node has one single connection to the replication layer, which is used to push and get updates for entities of interest. The second advantage is that the same streaming and replication logic that we already use for clients can be applied to servers, and that server nodes will only stream in a small area, which will greatly increase performance. It also allows us to increase resilience down the road. As long as a client is connected to the replication layer, the client stays connected even if the server node crashes. In this case, the simulation for an entity may be stopped for a moment, but as soon as a new server comes online, the simulation will just continue. While the underlying tech is close to complete.
All right. He did that very quickly, but you can see the benefit of this. If this isn't here, if the replication layer isn't here, then these servers would be the connection between the data and the client. When the server crashes, suddenly you wouldn't be getting that data anymore. Here's, I think, maybe a better explanation of it.
And besides some selected persistent player items, all that state would be lost when the server is shut down or crashed. The replication layer is fundamentally different, as the entire state of the universe is stored within a graph database. We call this entity graph, and it's an evolution of the original iCache.
So entity graph is what persistent entity streaming is working off of. That is the first part of this puzzle, and it's something we're actually going to talk about here in a little bit with Chris Roberts. He mentioned the entity graph not really working as much as they wanted it to, but just keep that in mind. Entity graph connects through the replication layer to the clients.
When we create a new shard, the initial entity state of the universe is seeded into this database. This happens offline before we let player join the shard. When the shard comes online, the replication mesh caches the state from the entity graph. As player connect to the shard and as we start to spin up new server nodes, simulation begins and alter the state of the universe. The replication layer does not only replicate these state changes to connect players and server nodes, it also replicates the state into the entity graph. Since the entity graph is a persistent database, the state of the shard is never lost, and even if the shard is shut down, the state persists and can be resumed at a later time.
And that's what we see now.
Benoit is going to...
So overall, the whole system is meant to continue to build on this idea that everything is always functioning, and it's just always persistent. I mean, that's the whole point, right? It's always persistent and everyone is there. It's that same ultimate goal of basically turning the whole game into one bowl where everybody can be there together. Now, obviously that's not going to happen. Everybody can't be there together. It would be insane. They can't get the whole planet into one single location. But the idea itself is all based around this idea of server meshing and around the immersion and persistence in the game. So yeah, here they mentioned that the replication layer is not in 3.21, working in a separate preview channel, and when it feels ready, we'll migrate over to the live servers in 3.21.x. So probably sometime in November or December. Primary reason to increment is to signify the next major tech milestone preparing to come online. They're targeting to introduce this during 3.21. In addition, there's more great content and features coming to 3.21, which we'll share more on in the upcoming roadmap roundup. Okay, so Xylo here mentions that we'll get a better picture on Wednesday. That's good. Any features that were planned for 3.20.x will be moved into 3.21, which we're aiming to initially release later this month. So we'll probably get 3.21 at CitizenCon time when 3.20.1 was going to come. As mentioned in Benoit's original post, the replication layer will be included in an upcoming technology preview channel, and that work will migrate to the live servers in 3.21.x. So just basically seeing the same information multiple times here. I don't think there's any more super crucial info, but that was kind of a look into why the replication layer is important, why 321 is being presented the way it is, and what we should expect from it going forward. We'll probably talk a little bit more after the Wednesday update. Maybe we'll talk on Thursday about kind of what we're seeing from these features and what the patch might look like and when these features might come more specifically. But for now, that's what we've got on 3.21. Cheers.